Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the final day of Victober. Today it is the 31st of October, which means that it is the last day of Victober. I thought in order to celebrate the glory that has been Victober and how much I've enjoyed doing it, that I would do a slightly different video. And so I reached out to several other fellow booktubers who enjoy Victorian literature and asked them to each recommend one piece of Victorian literature, which I've assembled into the video you're about to see. Hopefully this will also be a useful resource for those of you who are looking for more booktubers who enjoy talking about classics and Victorian literature. I'm really grateful to the other booktubers who have contributed to this video, and they're all really amazing. I will link all of their channels down below and you should definitely go and watch them all. Without any further ado, here are some booktubers recommending some awesome Victorian books.
Hi, I'm Anne and I'm from the channel Beyond the Pages, and a Victorian novel that I would recommend is East Lynne by Ellen Wood. It has fast become one of my favourite Victorian classics. It involves murder and intrigue and betrayal and divorce. It's just like a Victorian soap opera. It has so much drama. It was just a fantastic read that I don't think enough people have read, so one that I definitely highly recommend.
On a list of my favorite pieces of Victorian literature, I'd absolutely have to include Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Jane Eyre is about an orphan named Jane who grows up as an outcast in her cruel aunt's house and is shipped off to a strict and confining boarding school. Eventually, she becomes a governess working for Mr. Rochester of Thornfield Hall. This book is so delightful in that it's approachable for those who are completely unfamiliar with Victorian literature, but it also stands up to multiple readings and lends itself to critical analysis. It has some fascinating readings with regards to gender, post-colonialism, religion, and performativity. This book truly has it all. It's got long-lost relatives, creepy gothic scenes, a mansion full of secrets, compelling characters, and there just simply isn't a dull moment. I've already gone on for too long, but talking about this book has made me want to reread it really desperately. So I highly recommend that you pick it up, and I think I might do the same.
Why hello there everybody, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. Thank you so much to Katie for inviting me to be part of this video. For my Victorian recommendation, I went with Silas Marner by George Eliot. It's a pretty slim volume. The protagonist is Silas Marner. He is a weaver and a bit of an outcast. For years, all he's lived for is his hoard of gold. The story really gets going when Silas Marner's gold is stolen, and instead a little girl shows up on his doorstep. It's just such a charming tale. I absolutely love the characters. They are so strong. I would highly recommend it.
Naturally, the Victorian novel that I'm going to recommend is Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens, which is my favourite book of all time. It is an incredible book. For me, it is Dickens's best. It is his most interesting in terms of his presentation of gender, of class, in terms of the richness and complexity of his characterisation and plot. It is a book about crime and class and the River Thames. It is a book about money and marriage and rubbish and pretense. It is absolutely incredible and I cannot recommend it enough.
I'm Helene from Books by Lanes, and I would highly recommend Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So scratch everything you know about Wuthering Heights from your memory, and please don't expect Heathcliff to be a romantic hero because you will be disappointed, my friends. What I would recommend is actually focusing on the character of Hareton Earnshaw, who owns my soul, basically. He is wonderful, he deserves more love, he is so underappreciated, and yes, I would highly recommend this wonderful story of revenge.
I love North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell so much because it has everything I could possibly want in a book. It has romance, it has amazing familial relationships, amazing friendships. The social commentary makes the book deep and rich, and the setting is beautiful, the writing is amazing. The way she writes her characters' emotions is incredibly unique to me, and I just think this is a brilliant book, and I highly recommend it to everyone.
One Victorian novel that I would recommend is The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. This is Dickens at the beginning of his career. He is trying out more comedy. This book I found absolutely hilarious, and you will find him exploring themes that become quite prominent in his later books, and you're able to see the beginnings of these thoughts and ideas in his mind.
My favorite Victorian novel of all time is Villette by Charlotte Bronte. Here are 5 quick reasons why you should read it. 1, Lucy Snowe is the most unreliable narrator of all time. 2, it's a gutting portrayal of unrequited love. 3, it's a really fascinating look at mental health and depression in the 19th century. 4, there's some interesting Victorian gender bending. And 5, there's a scene where Lucy unknowingly takes opium and then meets a sphinx. So it's so good, you should definitely read it.
One Victorian classic which I absolutely love and would like to recommend is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I fell in love with Jane Austen as a teenager, but as an adult I could not find a classic to relate to. But Middlemarch changed that for me. What makes this book so special for me is that all the characters in this book are human. They are flawed, they make mistakes, but they are not mean people. Every chapter starts with a quote or a poem which gives a clue about the chapter. It deals with all the issues which we see around us as adults, and that is what makes this book so relatable.
Hi, I'm Jennifer from Insert Literary Pun here, and if I can talk about only one Victorian novel, it has to be my favorite book, The Mill and the Floss by George Eliot. It follows a girl named Maggie as her father loses his mill and her family's ostracized. But broadly, it's about the pain of loving someone in a way they can never fully return. And that's explored in all kinds of relationships. So many sentences made my heart flutter to know that somebody could put words together this way. It has weird pacing and a horrible ending, but I don't care. It's indescribably lovely, and I highly recommend it.
Hi guys, Kat here. So for my Victorian read, I am picking The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. We follow an American family that moves into a haunted house in the British countryside. And not everything goes as planned, especially for the ghost. And what starts out as a satire on the uncouthness of Americans and the outdated traditionalism of British society morphs into something else that is so lovely and so beautiful by the end of the story.
Hi everyone, and Kate here to tell you about my favorite Victorian novel, Wives and Daughters. This is most definitely not a sensation novel, but where I think the strength in this exquisite novel lies is in its character development and its intimate portrait of a community of people over the course of a couple years. You never leave this community. It's not incredibly plot heavy, but you are going to find that these characters become so real to you by the end of this, and you're going to be so sad when it's done. So if you want a book that has great character development and an amazing protagonist, Molly Gibson is my favorite protagonist in any book, then I think that Wives and Daughters is definitely worth your while for those who are character readers and enjoy beautiful writing. I highly recommend Wives and Daughters.
Hey, so I would like to talk about George Eliot's Middlemarch. I studied Middlemarch in my second year of university and I was skeptical due to the size of it, but I fell in love with it, and I would definitely encourage you to not be intimidated by the length and just dive into it. One of the many reasons that I love this book is its treatment of gender and marriage. In this study of a small town, a study of provincial life, George Eliot devotes a lot of focus into critiquing Victorian ideals of marriage. What I also love about the depiction of marriage in this book is its structural significance. In other works of classic fiction, marriage has been used as the end result, the piece of finality to the story. It's a tidy conclusion, whereas in Middlemarch, it occurs fairly early on. Dorothea marries Casaubon, and the rest of the book follows how that goes wrong. If you want a book that shows you that marriage is not the be-all and end-all, if you want a book that is full of social analysis, then I can highly recommend Middlemarch.
Hi everyone, my name is Libby Stevenson and I would like to recommend the book Flatland by Edwin Abbott. Now, I will forgive you if you have read this and didn't realize that it was Victorian because it has a very modern feel to the writing. This is set in a 2D world of geometric shapes, but it's not just about geometry, it's also full of social criticism about unscientific thinking and misogyny. I hope you enjoy!
Hello, so the piece of Victorian literature that I'm going to recommend to you is a play. It's The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, and to quote, it is a trivial comedy for serious people. This play is essentially a case of mistaken identity, where our main protagonist has several identities in which he uses to get out of social engagements and to basically suit his own needs. But if you're after a funny, warm, witty Victorian book, but also a book that's easy to read, pick up the play. The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. You won't be disappointed.
Hello everyone, it's Mal here from Mal's Bookland Adventures, and my favourite Victorian classic is the book that I have loved the longest in my life, and that is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. When I grew up, my grandmother was not really big into reading out loud stories, and so I rarely got read to, but I loved stories. And when I was about 5, my uncle got me his old tape recorder and a few story tapes, and one of them was a story tape of Alice in Wonderland. It was an abridged version. But I didn't know that, so I didn't mind, and you know, I listened to it over and over again, and it was just the most wonderful story. And I would go through the woods and look for rabbits, hoping they would take me into this magical world. And the story was also read to my daughter when she was a lot littler, and she loved it, and she now often picks up the book from the shelf and just rereads it for herself. So the magic of this book, that was published I think in the 1860s, is still going strong, and I shall love it forever.
My favorite Victorian author is Charlotte Bronte, and my favorite book from her is Jane Eyre. But usually when I recommend people to read Charlotte Bronte, I recommend Wilde, because I think this is her strongest novel. It deals with loneliness and grief. I just really adore this book, and I think it is the best of Charlotte Bronte.
My favourite Victorian novel has to be Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and the reason for this is threefold. First of all, Jane Eyre is a perfect heroine, very independent and free-spirited, which is unusual for a Victorian novel and very easy for us to empathise with. Second, the love story is just breathtaking. Although some people find Rochester a bit questionable, I personally really like his character development. And last but by no means the least is the general gothic atmosphere of this novel, because a large portion of it takes place in a secluded manor house. So that's all about Jane Eyre, my favourite Victorian novel of all time.
Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed getting a few slightly different Victorian literature recommendations. Do feel free to leave your own Victorian book recommendations down in the comments. And that's it. That is the end of Victober. Happy Victober. It's been a good month. I will be back fairly soon with my Victober wrap up, but I think I will probably give it a break of a week to 10 days because it's been a fairly intense month of a lot of videos. So again, happy Victober, happy Halloween, and happy reading.